Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode, we are going to talk about getting DMs to let you play evil characters in their campaigns. We're going to focus on what the stigma is and why DMs don't really want evil characters in their campaign, and how not to fall into those circumstances and actually be a benefit to your party. Following this, we're going to go into the individual evil alignments and get a little bit of a more in-depth look at how those particular characters should be played. This is kind of an RP guide, so, take it as you will. You don't need to follow everything we say. Play whatever way makes you feel better, but these are some ways that might help you get people to let you play characters that you've never had the opportunity to play before. So why are evil characters so bad for campaigns? Why do DMs not like them usually? A lot of the times, if people aren't playing a specifically evil-themed campaign, they really don't want anything to do with evil characters. And this comes with a great fear that's been, it's been proven time and time again to be very accurate. A lot of time when people play evil characters, they are so disruptive to the campaign that it makes it difficult for the DM to actually tell the story. So unless you're deliberately making a game where everyone is evil and you're fighting the forces of good, being evil tends to be very problematic for a lot of DMs. One of the other factors about being disruptive is a lot of people take evil to be a free license to kill everything in sight and cause a lot of trouble for NPCs and things like that. A lot of the time, this is going to affect how the story is being told. If you've played a few games, you understand how sometimes if you piss off the wrong NPC, things got a lot harder than they had to be. Imagine that, but you killed the NPC that was needed for the story. That's very difficult for the DM to deal with. That causes a very big problem in the story, and it's trouble. It's very difficult for people to have to deal with that. Another factor is the nature of what you're doing as an evil character, if done overwhelmingly consistent, might be disapproved by the rest of your party. It might put your party in unnecessary danger, or you might take too many liberties with your party. And, out of character, you're playing with your friends, and you're going to take a lot of what they want to do away if you're constantly doing these things or forcing the party to follow your actions. Like abusing the spotlight is sucky overall. You want to share the spotlight with your friends normally, but being evil and doing that in a group that isn't evil is just going to be a very bad taste for everyone else that's not your character. And you want to be able to share with your party because, again, you're playing with your friends, so you want to all have fun together. So that's another big factor. And then one of the final things about why DMs don't really like evil characters is they, you go out and you do these things and you set up these scenarios where you might have to need to interrogate someone for information. And sometimes you wiggle your way into having the evil character do it. And then they go too far. And now you're doing this whole torture scene. And a lot of people don't want that. They don't feel comfortable with that. That goes way, way, way too far. And they feel maybe it might be hard for them to say, hey, pump the brakes. I don't like that. Or tell the DM that. And then you have a whole bunch of people that aren't comfortable while you're having the time of your life. It's not good for the group morale. And you got to kind of understand and respect that. So it can be very, very detrimental when you do those kinds of things. So what we're going to talk about is how to mitigate that and how to set up circumstances so you're not that kind of an issue, but still gives you the availability to be an evil character. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to fundamentally break down what it is to be evil and to be a villain. And they're surprisingly a little different. So what does it mean to be evil as opposed to being a villain? Now, what majorly it breaks down to in our perspective here is that being evil in a RPG setting comes down to the simple 2 points. One, you're incredibly selfish as a belief system. Like you're the self matters so much more than everything else because everything else is beneath you. So keeping in mind of that kind of super selfish narcissistic view, life kind of really doesn't have much of a meaning if it's not important to you specifically. So because of that, you are violent because the repercussions of these people suffering doesn't matter to you. You are deadly because wiping people off the face of the earth would benefit you because you just don't have to deal with them. Whether if they survive, they might have questions later, and you don't really want anything like that. So you become this like the rules almost don't apply to you, because you're so great of a person that destroying these menial lives is beneficial to you as opposed to keeping them around, because inevitably they'll get in your way, or they might come back and then might be a problem further down the road. Villainy is this, and it can sometimes be altruistic villainy, where you want to change something about the world around you and bend it to your will, whether it's, life itself and become an eternal being through lichdom, or it's freedom itself, and you see it's caused so much war and chaos that you want to turn the world against that and make it follow your tyrannical rule, or you want to, just get revenge for something. The villain of the story has no redeeming values. The villain of the story usually, not that you can't make villains that are great and redeemable characters, but the villain of the story has to be very, goal-oriented towards one specific thing that's a detriment to the overall well-being of the world around them. That's kind of what separates them, where being evil, you're kind of just looking out for yourself, but you're a little bit of extreme with your punishment. Separating those two, and I know it's a very thin line that I kind of just put in, is kind of how you got to play this. So when you're being an evil character, you need to be able to understand that those are inherent to who you are. You matter more than everything else, and you're willing to hurt other people to get it. You keep that just together in one kind of box neatly on the side of the table, and you look at the villain and you understand that your aspects encompass everything. The whole world. Like, you're going as far as you can as the villain. And you don't want to play the villain. You just want to play evil, and how you do that is a matter of perspective. So what I mean by this is you got to look at the bigger picture when you're playing an evil character, which is why we suggest here that you've had a couple of games under your belt so you can kind of see what the way this kind of stuff develops and how the world is, and to see how your impacts affect it. Also how your DMs tend to set up their worlds and their organizations and such. But you need this bigger perspective, because how you view things is ultimately going to define whether or not you're evil. Because the rest of the world shouldn't be known that they shouldn't know you're evil. They shouldn't know off the bat, oh no, this is a bad guy. No, you should want to keep that secret, because you understand in the greater sense of the world, you don't have the power to do those things and get away from it. Get away from the repercussions of it. So you want to be able to understand that as a character so it can mitigate your actions. That's why you shouldn't be running around just killing every NPC in sight and causing rampant destruction, because you have to understand in this story, you're still vulnerable to the world around you. So you have to have perspective to understand that you can't do that. You can't kill the guard for no reason. You can't steal from the rich person just because it happens to be in that scenario. You can't mug the prince. It doesn't work that way, because you understand that the world is a big organization. It's a big thing with a lot of moving parts to it, and these parts are connected because the NPCs can talk to each other when you're not around. Very important concept to understand. Perspective is what's going to keep your character evil, but in a way that you can still play the character. Now, being evil isn't necessarily a bad thing in a group of people who are good and bad and, good, morally neutral, whatever, somewhere along those lines, because you can work with it. And the way you do this is you use a goal. This is the most important thing when making evil characters, and we will talk about this a lot. Goal-oriented characters we feel is a necessity when playing evil. Because whether you're lawful, neutral, or even chaotic, you have to strive for something that's bigger than yourself. You can't just be an evil character and just walk around just haphazardly becoming the hero. It really doesn't work that way, because ambition is important for very, very detailed scenarios where you have to be certain ways and certain points. If you're a lawful evil, you have a certain set of rules that you have to follow, or obligation, or an organization you're part of, but you have to want more out of that organization in order to kill your way to the top. It doesn't work if you're just, oh yeah, no, I'm just here and then we'll just see what happens. It doesn't. You end up finding yourself in a way that you're just kind of half of what you can be. And that's an important thing to desire more. to want to do more and to want to go out there and face these incredible challenges, because it helps you. It helps the self achieve what the self wants. And this is just a footnote into how you got strong enough to achieve that. And you get that through perspective. So what we're going to talk about next is dealing with the party and how party relations affect what you're doing. Dealing with the party. Now, you are an evil character, so nothing matters more than yourself. Really, why would you have other adventurers? Well, simply because you're using perspective. You're being able to see that these people are destined for something great, or they have powers that might exceed your own in certain aspects. Learning what these things are is very, very important. Learning that the cleric can revive you if you're down makes the cleric important to you, because you're going on adventures where something might happen to you, and keeping that person around and in your favor makes sure that if something happens to you, they'll risk something to protect you. That's a great reason to befriend these people. Another good reason is you're not too savvy with charisma and persuasion, and those kinds of things aren't really your forte. Having a bard who's able to do those things, who's able to see things in a way that might be leaning towards your side but not exactly fully there, is a great reason to keep your bard around. You need these things because you have an understanding of what I like to call the power dynamic. You understand as an evil character your station within that. That's one of the more important things about being evil. You know when you are weaker than someone, because you have to bow to that will, because you're not strong enough to take it from them and to take their position. So when you see someone succeeding in a field that doesn't happen to be yours, you learn to respect that, you learn to appreciate that, and what makes you evil is you learn to manipulate that to get what you want. That's very important. Now, again, out of character, you're playing with your friends. You don't want to manipulate them if you don't have to, but you want to make sure your character has this undertone with what they're doing, or trying to get people from go from one side to your side. Doing so is how you're going to mitigate your reasoning for A, protecting the party members, B, joining them on adventures that you don't think are necessarily important to what you're doing, and C, going after them in case something happens to them or they get lost or taken. Protecting them helps them to see you as valuable, or make them feel like they owe you something and you intend to collect on that. It's very important that you do, so you want to do these things for them. You want to make sure that you are willing to play the game, do whatever crazy things have to happen, because that will bring them to your favor, or the rest of the party to your favor. You can do this by doing a great thing that I happen to call talking to the rest of your party. Get to know their characters in character. Learn some of their backstories, some of their motivations. Talk to them, because it builds this nice RP moment for players that love to roleplay. And to be honest, everyone wants to talk about their character endlessly. Usually it's a little harder, especially for people that do kind of this... It's kind of a normal thing that happens pretty often, but if you make a character too dark, too edgy, basically you're not the guy that's going to walk up to people and talk to people. So you end up writing yourself into this like silent, dark corner of coolness, where you're too cool to say anything and you're too brooding to really go out and reach towards people. But you have this incredible backstory, and if nobody talks to you, nobody gets to hear it. So it ends up being a little bit of a thing that everyone who makes an edgy character kind of falls into. But you get that scenario, you get to be able to talk to other characters and get them to tell those stories which they all want to tell. And it also gives the DM a good break for a few minutes, just so that way he can get some other things set up, or just learn about your characters and how they interact. And maybe he'll find a hook in there that he wants to put in or something cool. But it gives them a moment or two, to collect their thoughts. And it gives a newer player or just a roleplay happy player an opportunity to talk about themselves, which everybody always loves. Especially me. Personally, if you give me the opportunity to tell you my character's backstory, I will be there for days on end. Because it's just fun for me. But it gives you this opportunity to get invested in the other characters, to have them tell you who they are, and to use those personal hooks about who they are and these moments that define them in order to pull them to your side. Someone who maybe lost a sibling because of a tyrant's attack, you might now start calling this person brother or sister, and it might cause that character to develop this affinity to you. And that's what you want. Again, you want it because you want them to need you to keep you around, because ultimately your character doesn't care about them, but having extra people in their pocket is going to be beneficial for them and their rise to tyranny. So talking to them gives you this great opportunity to do so. It gives you this great opportunity to learn more about them, to get them to talk about themselves, and out of character, it's a fun time to learn new things about other characters. So that's very important, and that builds this sense of false flooring for your character, where he's interested in everyone, so he cares about everyone, so he knows so much about all these characters, and he takes the time to get to know them. How could he possibly be evil? So when you do something and you finally get that opportunity to let that evil go, they're more lenient. Maybe they'll say, oh, maybe it's something to do with his past, and maybe I'll talk to it next time he approaches me about it, or we get this opportunity to talk. And you never approach them, but it just falls to the wayside to the more important things. And you got to do this evil thing and get away with it. And that's what's really important. You build these false walls, and people just don't want to go through them because you're their friend. You're that nice guy. So when you get the opportunity to be bad, to be evil, to let that part of you out, you've earned a certain longevity of slack with what you can do. And people are less entailed to challenge you on it, because they understand your characters are friends. I mean, that's brother. He didn't do that because he's evil. He just did that maybe because there was some other things going on. And if we had time to get to know it, that would be great. But currently we don't. So let's just keep pressing with the story. And now you're free. You know, like, you got that opportunity, and you got to be very, very perceptive to see those opportunities when they arise. Because again, as an evil character, and we'll talk about this later in the other videos, you need perspective. And you need to understand your opportunities to be evil, because you can't just be evil constantly. And this is what actually is going to be important, is doing evil things constantly. Killing innocent people, you're evil, it makes sense to you, why not? But doing it in front of the party, bad. How do you get around this? You don't do it. you wait for the opportunity to unleash those dark parts of you, like Dexter Morgan on the show Dexter. You know, you can't just go out and do it consciously. You got to do your homework first. You got to find out a way to do it, and then you get the opportunity to, and you have to take it. But you can't do it in front of your party, because if your party knows you do those things, it's bad for your image, it's bad for the party, and if you get caught, it's problematic, because you can't stay unless you're redeemable, and if you're redeemable and you lie, which is probably going to be the scenario, and you get caught again, you will not be forgiven. These things are important, because playing an evil character, you need to put your big boy pants on in case you get caught, because it means you're probably going to get kicked out. Your character is going to get kicked out, or your character is going to be in a world of trouble that you don't want. You want to be evil, you don't want people to know, and that's why everyone who's evil kind of wears a mask. So your party's perspective of you is important, because it affects how far you can get away with things in game. Out of game, they're your friends, man. Get to know them in game. Give them an opportunity to talk. They're gonna love it. They're gonna feel good about it. They're gonna feel like their character is redeemable, like that is cool. That the backstories that they worked on are awesome, and it's a good feeling. And you want as many of those as possible whenever you do anything. So, one more final thing we're going to talk about, and then we're going to bring the video to an end, and that is the most important thing about playing an evil character, and that is talking to your DM. So with talking to your DM, the most important thing you have to bring up is setting up what I like to call the safety net. You want to make sure the DM has this availability to reel your character in case you go too far or it's becoming problematic to your party. This is very, very important when you get to things that might be more adult themed, like torture or any kind of evil act that you intend to do. Talking to your DM doesn't mean he's going to shut you down immediately. Just let him know, hey, these things are kind of falling along the lines of this happening, and my character would like to pursue that in case it happens. Gives this DM the opportunity to go, oh, you know what? That's going to cause a problem for the story, so maybe that'll just work the story away from that. Or maybe, hey, you know what? That could happen. That could work. That's cool. And let that go. But the important thing is about the safety net. It could be something like a description, like a warm breeze just encompasses you and you feel, the party feels this, and describe it as a strange magical effect, and then having your character just recognize that and then cool it and shut it down, because the DM is going to have this perspective. of how the rest of the party is feeling and how they're going towards things, because they can see it from their standpoint. You really can't, because sometimes you get in the moment, but this will help reel you in. This will make the DM feel more comfortable about you playing your character, because he knows you can shut it down and bring it back into a more regular alignment, and that it doesn't cause an issue. That's going to give you your first real level of trust between you and your DM in playing evil characters, so that as it goes on and the campaign goes further and further, he understands, like, all right, this is good. I can let him go out and do whatever wild thing he wants, because it's not going to destroy the campaign, and he's not going to hurt anybody else's, time or enjoyment. And the longer you do this with that in play, maybe the next session you want to play another evil character. Done, great. You did it once. It worked out. You guys were able to keep the peace and the joy going, and you were able to do something you wanted, because you wanted to play a character that was crazy. But you want those kinds of things, and it gives you this opportunity to do so, because you built this level of responsibility on your end and trust on the DMs, and that is where you're going to get your ability to play evil characters. Thank you for tuning in. Please, please, please like, share, subscribe, and come back to us next week when we have a new episode. Thanks for giving a creepy kid a chance.